Today, presenting with me, I'm Lynn Flinn, Senior Vice President at the Rowland Group, and I am lucky to have along with me the fabulous Stephanie Pitt, who has helped many, many people in their careers over the years. We're representing Tulsa and Houston offices here today. We have literally seen thousands of resumes between all the recruiters that we have at the Rowland Group. And we're going to base our experience today and our topic and conversation around what we hear from HR and hiring managers all the time. So these are things that they say they like about resumes, things they don't like. And that's our goal, is to just help you have the insider track on some of the things we hear every day. So Stephanie, you want to say hello? And
good morning and welcome, everyone. We look forward to having this presentation, and hopefully you guys will walk away with some good tips and tricks.
Excellent. And I would say this, that the vast majority of people, in my opinion, do not need to pay a lot of money to have a resume done for them. I feel like if you take the templates and the tricks that we're going to give you today, you do not need to pay money to do this. You can do it yourself. If you need a little bit of help with somebody doing a Word doc for you or helping you get it into a PDF format, that's easy to find a friend that can help you with that. It's really the content that you need to pull together, and that's what we're going to focus on today and give you some of those tools.
If everyone would like, you can enable your chat feature, and if you have any questions throughout the presentation, you can ask them in there. We will also be having tips and tricks throughout the presentation.
Excellent. And up next, we just want to briefly mention too that we're basing a lot of our information too on our years at the Rowland Group, from being in the field of talent identification in the areas of accounting, IT, engineering, and administrative. And we work with all levels, from very entry level all the way up to the highest levels. And we have 50 offices across the US, so we are in many, many different types of industries in this. So everything we talk about today should be applicable to just about any kind of resume you could possibly want to create. And next we have, what is the purpose, of the resume in the first place? Let's get to that first. Well, you want to highlight your skills and experience. You're not looking to tell your life story. We want it to be brief and to get across the major points. And the real reason we're doing this is we really want to get an interview, right? I mean, that's the real goal here, is if you can get your foot in the door, that's what you need to do with the resume, is to help you get there. And how are you going to do that? Well, you've got to stand out from everybody else. You can't be just like anybody else that's sending their resume in for a job. You want to make it stand out, and in a positive way. So that's what we're looking for. The average time that an HR or hiring manager spends looking at a resume is probably 20 seconds for the initial screen. So if you don't make it in that first 20 seconds, you're not going to be seen. So that's why we want to talk about, how do you get to be seen in a positive way?
Exactly. So the first part of your resume should really be about you, starting with your heading. So obviously you want to put your name on there, but also your contact information. And I know this seems very elementary. However, we see resumes all the time where people have, typos in their email addresses, or have inappropriate voice messages on their cell phones. So we want to make sure that, number one, the information you're putting in is accurate, but also professional. A lot of our candidates will actually choose to create new email addresses just for their job search, so that they are represented professionally. And then also, to kind of touch on the voicemail, it's important to make sure that you're representing yourself in a professional manner, not only on paper, but if someone does reach out to you, that can be a big deterrent for someone to actually pursue you as a candidate if your voicemail is not professional. So keep that in mind as you start your resume, and also just kind of outside of your resume, what that will impact. The second piece of kind of getting started is just to determine the appropriate format for your resume. We have identified what we would say is three different formats. You can start with chronological, which lists your work experience and puts a lot of emphasis on that. We also have the functional format, which actually puts a lot of emphasis on your qualifications and skills. And then there's the combination of both. We recommend the use of each of these depending on the circumstances of your search. A lot of people will choose to use the chronological format if they are looking for a position that's similar to others that they've held across their career. The functional format may be better to use if you're really looking to, move forward in your career and get a role that might provide some advancement. And then obviously you can choose to do the combination of both to kind of put the emphasis on both. No matter what format you use, make sure that the information you're putting in is accurate. And also, you're going to hear us repeat this throughout the presentation today, but make sure that is clear and concise in the information you do represent.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of discussion around, should you have an objective at the top of your resume or not? There's different schools of thought on that. But the main thing is you need to make sure if you do put an objective statement or a summary statement at the top, that you want it to be specific to the position. If, for example, if somebody says that they want to be in a position of management and they put it at the top of the resume, but they're applying for a job that's not management, then a lot of times they're going to get flagged and thrown out for consideration because it didn't match up to the job they applied for. So be really careful with what you put up there and make sure it's generic enough or broad enough or specific to the actual position if you're going to make a new resume that will apply to that position that you're applying for. So that's the thing. And Stephanie, you and I have talked about this a lot about sometimes people are using more of a summary at the top now, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. And I actually tend to lean that way with most of my candidates. I think it is a good representation of kind of a mini cover letter of sorts, where you're able to express your background, a little bit about you personally, but also be very specific about how all of that culminates into the position you're looking for and applying for.
Exactly.
So the next thing to discuss is the work history. We want to make sure that when you're listing your work history, you're not only listing the company name, but location is actually very important. And by location, you don't have to list the physical address, but the city and the state. Obviously, you want to list the titles. We do recommend if you've held different titles at the same company, that you're listing that under that same company, not having a different job, not listing the company multiple times. And then obviously with the dates, the month and the year is completely fine. Just make sure that it's uniform with every position you list. So if you have, the month, day, and year listed, make sure that that's listed for each position you have on your resume. And then also something that's really important that we highly recommend doing is giving a brief description about the company, even if the company is well known, but more importantly, if it's not. And that description should really list the industry, the size, and that will help new hiring managers and potential opportunities understand the scope of the role that you held within that organization. And then obviously we want to make sure that you're listing your most relevant work history first. So kind of using that reverse chronological format. And no matter what format of resume you use, you always adopt that philosophy.
And I think when we talk about job duties versus accomplishments on resumes, the thing about job duties is if you're a controller, let's just say, most everybody that's going to be looking at that resume knows what a controller does. So you don't need to tell them a whole lot of that, but it's good to give them an overview and to mention some of the highlights, but that's kind of a so what, who cares? The real question is, what were your accomplishments? What did you do? And how can you quantify that? So for example, let's say a great thing to put on there might be that, did you save the company money? If so, how much was it? Did you save them $50,000? Did you maybe reduce the closing days from 3 days to 5? Were you the top salesperson for 8 out of the 12 months of the year? Those are specific and quantifiable, and that's what will make you stand out when we talk about stand out in a positive way. And then if you can validate that, even better, you can get the reference that you give to them to validate that indeed, Miss Stephanie did save the company $50,000. This is fantastic. So this is what we're looking for. And that is what's going to make people really take notice if they see something really great on your resume of something you've accomplished. And one way to think about that is, what are you most proud of? What's something you're proud that you accomplished? And that's a good starting point. I always encourage people to take notes and to keep their performance evaluation so they can see all the things that they've accomplished and save that to put on their resume as well. Next up, I would say that the problem, action, and result is really also what you're thinking about, is what was the problem, what action did I take, and what was the result? And if you can do that, then you're going to be well on the road to having some great accomplishments to put on there. So that's what I would encourage people to think about. Next, gaps in short-term assignments. Okay, so this is something that we run into as complaints a lot, is somebody's a job hopper. They do not enjoy to see a lot of different jobs and hopping around. Now, if you've changed jobs though for a good reason, you can explain that on your resume. Or if you've had that happen one time, it's not that big of a thing if you had a short-term thing, but you've had some good job history in the past. So don't get too freaked out about this. But good job titles are really important to show how you've grouped those. Like Stephanie had mentioned earlier, if somebody had 3 different jobs and got promoted 3 times within the same company, make sure that's clear, because like we said, they only take a quick look at this, and if it looks like you've had 3 jobs, they may say, oh, this person's had all these different positions, but really it's just one company. Also, if you work for a subsidiary of another company, another reason why you want to put on there subsidiary of XYZ company. So those are things to do to make your groupings look good. Next also is that you may have a job that was a short-term assignment on purpose, like it was consulting or temporary assignments. We have that a lot with the Rowland group. Internships or summer jobs. That is always great to explain that on the resume, that this was specifically meant to be that. So if you can just remember that you're trying to make things make sense. If somehow you maybe had a 1-year gap, I've even seen somebody put on there, took care of ill father or mother or whatever, and they explained why there was a 1-year gap in there. So that makes people more comfortable with what was going on in your life and why that might have occurred.
The next thing we want to discuss is how to list your education. And again, while this seems somewhat something we all kind of understand, we see a lot of times people list this without a lot of detail. So you want to start with your most recent degree first. If you have a master's degree, you would want to start with that. If you have a bachelor's degree, obviously you want to start with that. Make sure that you're listing the college name and then the specific degree. One thing I do want to make note of is, I'm going to use the example of an accountant. If you received a degree in business administration, but your career has been more on the accounting side, you may want to list the degree and then the number of hours you have in accounting coursework, as well as any minors that you accomplished as well. We also recommend listing your GPA, especially for new graduates, but also if you have a GPA of 3.0 or higher for anyone, we recommend listing that, or you're welcome to also list your major GPA. Maybe if your overall GPA wasn't so great, but your major GPA was, go ahead and list that instead.
Absolutely. I think that some of the other skills or things that you can put on there, military service is always a great thing, because people think, oh, that's a positive thing that somebody has the discipline and they serve the country. That's usually going to be seen in a very positive way. Certifications also, if you have a certified public accountant, you do want to make sure you spell out that word and show it in CPA, just initials, because it will come up different ways on resumes. So I'll explain that more in a little bit about the searching mechanisms that companies use, along with software systems. If you've worked, say, in a particular AutoCAD program, or if you've done Great Plains or Dynamics or different types of IT softwares, that's a great thing to have listed on your resume, because again, if somebody's doing a search and they want somebody with that experience and your name comes up in the search because you had it on your resume, then that's how they're going to find you. So make sure to be very particular about having a section on your resume that has all those systems listed.
Definitely, that's so important. And other pieces of information that we highly recommend listing on your resume are professional organizations, as well as community involvement, and then any awards and achievements that you may have accomplished. All of those things help increase kind of the hiring manager's ability to understand the value you add to their organization. For professional organizations, those are important because it helps show your motivation to continue to learn and grow within your profession. And then community involvement obviously helps a company understand not only your motivation to look outward and help your community, but it also shows them that you're able to help market them and increase their visibility in the community. And then awards and achievements, for obvious reasons, help set you apart from other candidates out there. They can see that you have accomplishments and you have those things that maybe other people don't, and maybe they would like to have on their team.
Absolutely, and I think it also shows some leadership abilities when people have served on committees and have chaired events and things of that nature, and that they've been able to successfully accomplish something outside of the workplace. It makes it, you feel that they can also generate that in the workplace as well.
Exactly.
References. So I want to talk a little on that when you see a resume, it doesn't have to have references right on the face of the resume, because that does take up a lot of space. So you can always put available upon request. And also, I love to have a person who walks in my office though and has it all tied up with a nice photo, and they've got a separate page with all their references on it. And you know they've thought about it in advance, and they can provide them right away. So that makes you also, as a job seeker, move along quicker in the process if you've already got that available for them to use. And the most important thing is be sure you obtain permission from your references, so that when you ask those references, hey, is it okay if I use you? And they've said yes, and they're expecting calls to come in. If you can also notify them when you're having a really great opportunity available for you, and you told them that, hey, this person may be calling, then they'll actually take the call, because I know I screen a lot of my calls if I don't know a number coming through. And if I'm expecting somebody's reference to call me, I will definitely take the call or return the call quickly if I know they're looking for an opportunity.
Exactly. And one other thing I want to note with that is, as a hiring manager, if we attempt to call references multiple times and they do not return our calls or return any sort of communication, it can be viewed as a negative reference. So again, kind of tacking on to what Lynn is saying, make sure that you're talking to your references and that they are prepared to talk to anybody that might reach out to them about you.
Absolutely. Okay, next slide. The length of the resume is, we want it to be in 1 to 2 pages. If you go beyond that, you're going to lose your audience. Also, they're really thinking, can this person be concise? I mean, do they have the ability to be concise? Because, if that's a problem for them, that's going to be a problem in the workplace too. So they want you to get your point across in 1 to 2 pages. The margins need to be nice, so that you've got a nice white space around the edges, like 1-inch margins around the whole thing is what I like to see. And they're looking for a font size that is reasonable. So you don't want your font to be so teeny. You have to get out a magnifying glass to read the thing. And you don't want it to be so large it looks like you're looking at a kindergarten book either. So we're looking for something that looks professional. The templates we're going to show you at the end that you can use will obviously give you some of those things that you can use to get your length and everything correct.
So We wanted to touch on this because we do see a lot of resumes that use personal pronouns. Do not, for any reason, use personal pronouns. Again, I'm going to go back to the professionalism statement. Make sure that you're using action words. No use of I, me, my. That's just not a professional way to represent your skills. And action terms, action verbs, and kind of going more that route will help really identify the fact that you played a part in that, and really shows a lot of motivation, if that makes sense.
Exactly. And the thing that we always like to have on resumes too is we want to see bullet points.
Yes.
Right? I mean, you want to see those. You don't want to see a bunch of craziness, right?
Exactly. We want to make sure that when using bullet points, you're being consistent, not only with the type of bullet point you use. We all know that there's different options out there. Be consistent with the type and make sure that you're using a very professional, the ones we use on this slide are probably the best ones to use. Don't get too fancy with it. And then make sure they're uniform. We see a lot of resumes where, the bullet points aren't on the same margin, and that really throws off the emphasis on what you have on your resume. But by using bullet points, it will help draw attention to what is on your resume. So you want to make sure that, a hiring manager, as Lynn said, that glances at your resume is going to pick up on the things that are going to get their attention, and the use of bullet points will help with that.
The other thing to watch out for is typos, which may seem obvious. Would spell and grammar check be enough for this? The answer is sounding a no. This is one of my favorite stories that I tell, is that I have seen so many resumes where I'll see the word manger on it, and I'm fairly certain that unless you're Jesus, it's probably not supposed to be on your resume. So what they're trying to say is manager. Did they do spell check? Sure, manger is a real word. But so that's why you've got to read it backwards, forward, sideways, and also have somebody else proof it. I would always have at least 2 people proof it. And I would pick someone who is very detailed, not somebody who's your, oh yeah, looks great kind of person. You need somebody who's really going to dig in and read every single word. So can't emphasize that enough, how many times I've seen professionally prepared resumes. And Stephanie can also back me up on this, that we'll see mistakes on there, and it should have been caught, and it wasn't.
Definitely.
The next thing that I want to talk about is electronic formatting on resumes and what that's about. First off, the customized templates that we're going to mention that you can use, definitely pick those up and pick something that fits you. We don't want any fancy formatting. What's an ATS? It's an automated tracking system. Most businesses are using some form of this. So when they are pulling resumes in, they're scanning your resume. That is why if you put any of these crazy looking bullet points or crazy looking stuff on your resumes, like no pictures, don't do that. Because it may not even scan at all. And then all the work you did and all those words you put on there won't even be pulled into the system.
Exactly. We wanted to touch on paper as well. While most of us are submitting resumes via email or through, as Lynn said, an electronic tracking system, we still suggest bringing a couple of copies of your resume to your interviews. So when you're doing that, you want to make sure that you're using professional paper. Going back to the term, don't use anything fancy. White or ivory is perfect. Don't sway outside of that. It can draw attention away from what is listed on your resume, as well as a lot of hiring managers will want to make notes on that and then scan those notes into their electronic database system. So if you're using paper that's not white or ivory, this scan may not work. Therefore, they're not going to be able to keep those notes handy, and it could, really negate part of the process.
Cover letters, there's also some debate on this, that some people don't even think you need to do them anymore, which is fine. You don't necessarily have to do a cover letter unless it's a particular job that you really want to show something specifically special for. But don't do generic ones. If you're going to do it, take the time to do it right and really make it specific to the particular job that you're applying for. Like an example of, you sometimes could use an email versus a cover letter in today's realm. And what you could do is be sure you are explaining, say, if you're applying for a job out of state. That drives me crazy when I see somebody applying from some other state and they don't explain to me, why are they interested in Tulsa, Oklahoma? Do they have a particular reason they want to be here? They can make it seem so much more clear if they just explain, we've got family in the area, or I used to go to school there, or I really want to relocate to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Then they're serious about their search, and they didn't just blast it out to everybody around the world. Also, you want to proofread everything like crazy again, to make sure that you're not going to come out worse by making misspelled words or bad grammar in your letters that you send or your email. And be brief, just get to the point. Steph, what do you think about format as far as if you do a cover letter?
Definitely. I always recommend that if you do a cover letter, that you use the outline of, maybe the first paragraph being about your background experience, and then giving them a little taste of who you are. Kind of using Lynn's example, if you're moving out of state or applying for jobs out of state, kind of explaining that helps show them that, maybe it's family and that kind of thing. But also the second paragraph kind of taking on more of your achievements and career progression in a very clear and concise format. You don't want to write a book. And then the third kind of being exactly what you're looking for and how that fits into the role that you're applying. Again, clear, concise, brief is very key. Again, hiring managers don't take a lot of time initially to thoroughly read a resume or a cover letter. So you want to make sure that it's attention grabbing and it's brief, clear, and concise.
Very good. Very good. Okay. And then I'm going to finish out just really quickly with how you can stay motivated during the job search. First off, we know it's a tough time. We deal with this every single day, that people come into our office, and it's a hard thing to look for a search, especially in today's world where we are right now. It's even harder. And but so we want you to be in a positive state of mind. First off, think about your job search as your job. You really have to think about it that way, that you're going to have specific goals that you're going to have of what you're going to do each day and how you're going to take it on as a job. You can't be a hermit, although in today, again, sometimes we are hermits a bit the way it is, but you still can reach out to people even from, a virtual world like we are today. So we can send emails, we can call people just like we would normally. So make sure you're reaching out to people. Your support systems are really important right now. So when you have friends that you can reach out to, and we'll talk some of those ways you can have some more support systems, but make sure you stay around and think about being around people that'll bring you up. Reach out to all your contacts and ask for informational interviews, which means you just tell them, I know you may not find me a job. That's okay. You don't have a job for me today. That's okay. I just want you to help me stay connected with other people that might be able to help me as well. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to set up a follow-up time just to follow up to see how things are going. And they can follow up is vital. Keep a little tickler of when you're going to call back and go back to talk to people, because you never know, that day you call might be the very day that they say, oh, guess what? I just heard about a job. I'm so glad you reminded me. So don't be afraid. I had a friend that did that, and that's how he was successful. And the other thing about it is you've got to stay away from negative people during this time. If you've got naysayers that are just like, you'll never find a job, then those are not the people that you should be hanging around with right now. So I had two people that I had to tell them, just stay away from each other. And they admitted to me that was good advice. And the other thing is, when you are networking and stuff and contacting people, and even these, virtual meetings, these are ways that you may find your next job. So don't discount what those connections can do for you. So it's vital that you always stay motivated during that search time. And then I'm just going to share a little bit here on some of our tips, our links and stuff that we want to give you for resources. Vault resume samples, those have got some excellent templates you can use, and I believe those are the ones that have different types of industries you can pick as well. So if you want to pick out, say you are in the construction industry, they may have a resume that's specific to you. If you're in a management level position, they're going to give you different types of choices you can use there. The interview guide's resume format's also very, very good resource to check into. And then I also want to bring in Clay Landrum, who heads up our Houston office, to talk about a couple of our Texas resources as well.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. So great information. One of the things that we do a lot down here in Houston is utilize the Texas Workforce Commission for people that have been found themselves currently looking for opportunities. If you go to their website, it's a great website, free to join, and it'll show jobs across the state of Texas or here in Houston, wherever you're looking. Additionally, it's got free templates for resumes and different tips to create new resumes. It's got a veteran services link, which is a really great link as well. And then there's some additional education and training links that are all free. So we highly recommend that. I think this morning I saw there were over 240 new jobs posted today here in Texas. So good sign. Additionally, we know Oklahoma and Texas are full of oil field workers and families and a lot of displacement there. So Oilfield Helping Hands is a group that we've partnered with for quite some time. And they're a really great resource as well to provide training and networking opportunities. And they're good about just picking up the phone and talking about where they're seeing people being hired and where they know some leads on new opportunities are. So those are two resources we definitely recommend down here in Texas.
Yeah, and then a couple more for our area and overall. Just System One's website, our parent company. If you look at there, they've got some great resume tips as well. And a group that's local to Tulsa is Overcoming Job Transitions. That is an excellent, excellent group. I have spoken to that group. I've been to their group many times, and I can't emphasize enough what a great job they do of pulling people together. They do have Zoom meetings available at this time. So I would highly suggest going to their website and getting involved. They have great tips and great ways to stay motivated during your job search. And some important resume tips that we threw on here was what Google looks for when they're trying to hire people. And we actually saw this after we'd already done our presentation. And we saw that many of the things that we put on here, luckily, Google also agreed with. So we just wanted to alert you to what kind of things that companies are seeing out there. And I think that's about it for today. If we had any questions, Stephanie, we could take maybe a couple questions if we got anything in there from the chat, or any questions you want to throw at us.
Yes, we did receive a couple of questions. One of those questions was, how many years of work experience do you recommend?
Okay, that's a great question. Typically, I think Clay and Stephanie and I would all say that we would recommend no more than maybe 10 years back. Now, if somebody only had 2 or 3 jobs, they might be able to go further back than that. So that's okay, as long as you just don't make it go past our 2-page requirement. But generally speaking, I wouldn't go too much further than about a 10-year period. Now, when you're filling out an application, be careful, because many companies do want to know all the way back, because they may be very particular, and make sure you don't leave things out when you fill out an application and get yourself disqualified. Any other question for us, Stephanie? Did you say of another one?
Yes, would be, what format should I send my resume in? PDF or Word?
Okay, I think that the PDF is definitely a great way to go from most applications, because you want it to make sure that there's no formatting problems when you do different versions sometimes of Word. It can mess up the formatting when somebody receives it. But on the other hand, I know, Stephanie, you kind of feel strongly that you like to see things in a Word format as well, because you can help make changes that way easier, right?
Yes. So I think it depends on the audience you're sending it to. If you're actually applying for a specific position within an organization, PDF is a great format to make sure nothing gets shifted around. But if you're working for a resource like myself, or a friend or family member that you feel like is a good resource to help you with your resume, I would highly suggest doing that in a Word document, just because it's easier to edit back and forth and really get the value from that.
Right. And it's good to save, your resume like that in 2 different formats, so that you just got it available no matter what they want to see. You've got it ready to go.
Definitely.
And is there a preferred font to use?
I would just say that you don't, like we talked about, pick the more universal fonts that are out there. The templates should have some of the normal fonts you want to use. Don't use any really hard to read, weird italic-y looking stuff or anything like that. Just something pretty basic that still looks nice. And make your fonts be pretty consistent throughout your resume, as we talked about. You don't want to make it look too jumpy and strange, and the size of your font needs to be consistent when you're within the body at least. Your title at the top could be bigger, but you don't want to have it where you're looking at it and it just looks weird and you can't figure it out and you're like, oh, the font size is different. You don't want it to look funky like that.